What's up, everybody? I have an amazing guest for y'all today. He goes by the name of Charles Wekselbaum of Charlitos Cocina. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on. I'm excited to jump into this conversation and learn more about what you do. But before we do that, I want to ask you this question. There's no right or wrong answer. What's good dough?
What's good dough? Well, for me, good dough is just dough that hits the spot, whether you're making it or eating it. It's dough that just makes you go, damn, that was nice, or damn, I did that. And for me, it's like both while eating it and making it and after the fact as well. So so yeah, that's in a very broad nutshell, one little inkling of what's good dough to me. But there's so many answers to that question.
You can never pick just one,
Yeah,
right?
you never pick just one. And I was like take that opportunity to say, it's amazing to be on your show. It's a real honor. I've been listening to a bunch of the episodes, and I've heard many people answer this question, and I'm always inspired because every time you ask it, I'm thinking like, damn, what would I say to that?
What
And
is good
so,
dough?
what is good? So I just think it's awesome, and just super excited to be here. Have a lot of respect for you and what you're doing. So.
Thank you. I'm excited for you to be here. And I love your answer because a pizza that hits the spot really speaks to me. And you know what hits the spot for me?
Yeah.
A pepperoni pizza. I think maybe with your expertise, it would be fun to know, like, and you, just for the audience listening, Charles here does charcuterie and not, and I joke with saying pepperoni because like he doesn't make pepperoni, but maybe just to show off some of your expertise. What exactly is pepperoni?
I would say, like, obviously, yeah, most people in the States, like, pepperoni is like is a type of salami that goes on a pizza. When I think of pepperoni, I think of I think of something a little different than what we do. It's has a certain spice profile. It's typically um, has some sort of a heat treatment step in it, meaning like it's cooked at some point, cooked or just like applied a mild heat treatment to give it a certain texture. And yeah, I mean, it can mean many different things to many different people, but I think like, you know, sort of the mainstream understanding and the mainstream definition, at least what you find in a lot of pizzas, that's what it is. It's some sort of a heat treated salami with a particular flavor profile. Um, yeah, put on a pizza.
What is heat treatment and why do you choose not to do it for your specific cured meat?
So heat treatment can mean many different things, right? Typically, in an environment of making cured meats or making charcuterie, a heat treatment could be like something, or as low as like 130 degrees for a certain period of time. It doesn't necessarily mean cooking, but it just means applying like a high enough level of heat that would take care of certain pathogens, get rid of certain bacteria. That would also like change the texture of the product depending on what you're going for. So I mean, typically in a cured meat setting, it's used either to achieve like texture, appearance, flavor, or to achieve some sort of like a food safety step. So like obviously if you apply heat to something, you're killing off pathogens and killing off a number of the things that perhaps you don't necessarily want to eat, right? Um, and oftentimes like you can save time and money and different steps in the process by applying like a mild heat treatment. And I think that's what you find oftentimes in the pepperoni. What we do is a little bit different. What we do is just like an old school air dried salami, no heat treatment. So our salami is never see above like 76, 77 degrees. So that's like, maybe 78, like that area, and we can get into that later. And that's only like for a short period of time for the fermentation. Typically, the majority of the life of our salamis live in like in the low 50s, that sort of temperature range. And the reason for it is, I just think it produces a completely different product, right? Like a salami that's been slow aged and dry cured without any heat. The texture of the protein is different, the flavor is different, the water activity is different. Just like the whole mouthfeel is different, the whole experience is it's just a different product, right? And I would say, like, it's not to say that one is right or wrong or anything like that. Obviously, people do different things during their process for different reasons. But in our particular case, we've just decided that like the product that we're looking to make is best made if we don't use a heat treatment step.
How did you get into this world? I would love to see how one develops all of this knowledge around charcuterie.
How did I get into this world? I mean, well, I've been doing this or I've had my business for about 11 years now. Started out in 2011. So I'm 38 years old for reference. And I got into it at the time. I was working with my father. My father had a business in New York City. It was sort of like a hardware, houseware store. We were super tight, and it was like it was a family business and very sort of like New York place, like full of merchandise and lots of different people, very diverse, different languages spoken, the whole thing. And so it was great. And so he had that business for almost 50 years. So unfortunately, the business did not survive, and he ended up, getting out of the business. And I found myself at a place where I needed to figure out what to do in my life. I was very interested in charcuterie. Like I had developed this sort of curiosity about it, and sort of like as a hobbyist. And I was just kind of like messing around with charcuterie, and reading a lot of books and talking to whoever I could talk to about it. And it was just like this whole concept of like, or this whole sort of idea that you could take, like I was alluding to before, you could take this highly, highly perishable food, right, which is raw meat, and you could leave it in the zone where it's most prone to perishing for months and years at a time. And on the other side, instead of having something that, that's rotten essentially, or that makes you sick, you have something that is not only long lasting, can last indefinitely, but has transformed into something really beautiful. And if you do it right, so like the right combination of salt and thyme and airflow, and that whole idea just like fascinated me, and I was just, nerded out on it and super excited about it. So I just, and I was sort of like looking around me and saying, all right, like, in the US, we're at this sort of inflection point with food in many exciting ways. Like I could go to my local bodega in New York and pick from like 30 or 40 different beers, right? Or like, an increasing number of cheeses. Like just buying a chocolate bar was like, a really layered experience, right? The conversation was getting a lot more complex around just food in general. And but then I would like look at the charcuterie selections and the salumi selections, and I would think like, why are there only like 3 or 4, if that, producers doing this at like a really sort of like I'll say like in a more ingredient focused manner, right? Like in a more technique focused manner, and I guess now I understand the answer to that question a little bit better. But at the time, it just seemed like, I could, maybe there was a chance I could do something here. And so I thought it would be being, being young and a little naive and hungry, and like sort of being raised with this entrepreneurial bone, I guess, for lack of a better word. It seemed to me like the only way that I was going to be able to really do something that I was good at, or that I could make an impact with, or produce something of value, was if I just tried to do it myself.
Many of us have dreams and ambitions to start something.
Deciding you want to get into the cured meat business and actually getting into it is two totally different things.
When we get back to the show, Charles is going to walk us through how he turned this side hustle into a full-on business. But first, a word from our sponsors. The What's Good Dough podcast is sponsored by Uni. I assume that my audience already knows what an Uni pizza oven is. And for those that don't, Uni changed the game by being the first to revolutionize what an outdoor pizza oven could be. If you're looking to make and sell pizzas, these Uni pizza ovens are so portable, you can put them in the trunk of your car, take them to a brewery, and start serving up amazing pizza right then and there. And if you're already doing that, it might be time for a second oven just to keep up with the demand. So if you're shopping for a new oven, whether it's your first or your fourth, please consider Uni. I have an affiliate link in the show notes, and if you use that link, I get a commission for the sale. At no extra cost to you, but it does greatly help this podcast. So thank you in advance for using that link.
To build a USDA, you have to deal with the USDA to build a facility, to get the permits, just a laundry list of all the things you need to do. Not to mention that I was like, at the time, I really thought I knew what I was doing. But, in retrospect, like, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to do this. Somebody said, yeah, try to find somebody who's like licensed to do this already and see if they'll let you operate under their establishment number. So I said, great. So that sounds easy enough, right? Like start calling, looking everywhere in New York and New Jersey and, Pennsylvania and all these places. And I would like pick up the phone. Hello, my name is Charles, blah, 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 blah. Like, I have this idea. And it was just like click, 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 click. No, 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 no. And this went on for months. This went on for about 6 months where I was trying to figure this out. And in the meantime, I was doing odd jobs, and it was an interesting period of time in my life. So, and one day, like 6 months into this, I was sort of frustrated, a little bit like close to like saying, okay, you know what, maybe this is not going to work out, and maybe I need to figure something else out. And I had like slowly expanded my search, so like New York, Connecticut, but suddenly like I found this place in St. Louis, Missouri, which I was like, St. Louis, Missouri, like I had a good friend of mine grew up in St. Louis, and his mom was living there, and I didn't really have much of a connection to this place, but there was a small old school Solo Maria that was there that had been in operation since the 40s and was like grandfathered into all of this USDA regulation, which is really, really hard to come by. It was like they would never get approved if they were built today. But the fact that they were built so long ago, Anyway, I just picked up the phone. It was like a Friday afternoon. Hey, I get like this kind of raspy sounding older lady with a thick Midwestern accent on the phone. Hello, like no, like hi, good afternoon. You have reached so and so, nothing like that. Like, hello, and I said, hey, can I speak to the owner? And yeah, I am the owner. What do you want? And it was like, all right. So I told her my story. My name's Charles, and I had this project, and and she kind of like cut me off, and she was like, all right, yeah. Why don't you come down here? Tell me a little bit. Why don't you come down here for lunch on Tuesday? I was like, oh shit. So I just booked a flight, like the earliest flight I could get to St. Louis that day. And so I went there. Lady, and this lady who I had this conversation with turned out to be, I call her like the unlikely queen of salami. Everybody, I feel like everybody who starts a business or everybody who goes on an adventure that requires a lot of luck and work and all the things, there's always at least one person along the way, usually more, but there's at least one who is kind of like your angel, or like your guide, or the person who just like really gives you a chance, and kind of like takes a risk on you. For me, that was Judy. We sat down, we had lunch that day, told her about my project. She was like, yeah, why not? She could have been like my grandma. I feel like maybe I reminded her of her son or something. I had no experience doing this. But she was like, yeah, all right, do it. Like, and I was very specific about my requirements, because like I didn't want, I wanted to control all the ingredients. I wanted to control the whole process. I literally like wanted to do everything, but I just needed somebody's USDA number and somebody with some understanding on how to operate larger scale equipment, to kind of help me out. All this stuff. And like there was a couple of times where like the USDA almost shut her down over my product, and it was like I was scared because I had no idea I was doing something wrong some of these times, but she would get the inspectors in there, say, hey, what's this? What's this? And but she would go to bat for me every single time, and she really put herself on stuck her neck out for me. I don't really understand why to this day because she was so good to me, and gave me a chance. But we just started out from there, and from that day that we had lunch, um, for the next 2 years, I was in St. Louis for at least 1 week out of every month. It just evolved, but it was amazing. It was beautiful, and we developed, a routine. And we would like schedule the production. So usually, like one production was finishing while we were starting another one. So I would spend that week like making salami, taking down another batch, putting it in boxes, sending it back to New York, selling it on the weekends. Basically, starting selling it at the Smorgasburg Market on Saturdays. At that point, which was like a just like a much smaller uh, iteration of what it is today. And then from there, from Smorgasburg, we got like a wholesale account. From a wholesale account, I got like a distributor account. From there, we started doing some shows. Um, and it was like, damn, I have a business now. So yeah, that's a very long answer to your question, Idris. So I hope that answers the question. But
Yeah.
that's how I got started. Um, and I feel super grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Judy. Oh, and I'll tell you the last thing about Judy that was like amazing. And I know like the way I'm telling it makes it sound like it was like a very linear process from like inception to like scaling up and everything was perfect and we started making money and all that, which was absolutely not the case. It was a bloodbath. It's been a bloodbath for most of it, but because I had like somebody support like Judy, I was able to kind of like learn all these things on the march, and like sort of navigate the ways as needed. And like a couple of after the first like basically like after the first production, I was like, all right, like so how much are you gonna charge me for all this? Like let's work out a price structure. Like you're gonna tell me how much it's all gonna cost because I can't just like come out. Like we need to figure something out. She was like, yeah. We'll talk to you. I'll talk to you about it. I'll talk to you about it later. I'll talk to you about it later. And like after a few times, I was like, Judy, this is serious. Like, I have like, hundreds of pounds of meat coming in. I'm freaking buying tickets. I'm coming out here to St. Louis like all the time. Like, and I need to like work out my pricing. I need to know how much this is going to cost. And then she like she so and then she just like looked me square in the eye one day. She said, "Son, when you can prove to me you're making some money doing this thing, then I'll start to charge you." And I was like, "This lady," I was like, "What is going on here?" But it was like, how some people are tough and they sound, they give you the tough love and they sound like, maybe I don't know it's tough love, I guess. It's like a little rough around the edges. That was Judy. It was like she would always do things that made me realize, like, wow, this lady really cares about me. And she was true to her word. It was like no bullshit. And I did pay her very soon out. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what, Judy, I'm not comfortable with this. Like you're giving me this service. I need to pay you something. Started to pay her some money and blah blah. But like her whole attitude was just like, you're a young guy trying to do your thing, you know, and I want to help you. Like you're doing something that I think is cool, and you're crazy. Like you're not obviously totally there because you're doing this. Like, but I want to help you out. So it was amazing. It was wonderful to meet somebody who supported me like that. And I always say like I have not forgotten that experience. And now that I'm 11 years in, I'm hopeful that I can pay that forward to people.
What kept you going? Just because I think that there are people listening to this who, want to do a legit pizzeria. Maybe they don't have the funds. Maybe, they are doing their pop-up and they're doing it unlicensed, but they want to do it legitly. And so maybe they're thinking, I could do it at a pizzeria. I could use a pizzeria as a commissary. I can think creatively about how to start a business. But every time I pick up that phone or send that DM, I'm not getting the answer. What kept you going?
You know, in my case, I made a decision, and I said, this is what I'm going to do this. Um, and I know that there's a way to do it, even if I don't fully understand what that way is. Um, I'm gonna figure it out. Um, and that was part of it. And I also, it, it's a great question. It's a great question that has sort of layered answers for me. To to me, it was very important to prove myself. That I, because I sort of like grew up in the shadow of an incredible father, mentor, um, all these wonderful things, right? And my father and I were extremely close, and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like I was always in his shadow, and it was really important for me to prove, I guess, just to myself that I was capable of doing something. That I was capable of just like building something from scratch. Um, so that's number one, or maybe that's number two. Um, and I would also say that, like, if you believe in what you're doing, which I believe in what I was doing, you know, the world is full of people who are going to try to talk you out of it, I guess. The world is full of people that are going to remind you that the structure of the world is not fair. This is not right, and there's a lot of things that are not right about the setup of how a business works in the U.S. and how to open a business and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you really believe in what you're doing, and it sounds like a cliche, but if you do believe in it, I mean, I think that ultimately, and if you have some persistence and some endurance, I guess, then you will get there, and you will ultimately find your way. And I think that, look, if your issue is money, there's always ways to raise money. If your issue is time, well, maybe, you just gotta like do a once over on your schedule, right? And figure out like how you can make the time work. But I think if you're committed to it and you really believe in it, like that 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 has the power to keep you going. And building anything is hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of endurance. It takes a lot of effort. Um, and you have to just like build it one brick at a time and understand that it's going to be slow. It's going to be hard, but it's worth it. It's worth it. I really do believe that. And um, I think like entrepreneurship, the ability to have your own thing, whatever that, whether it's a pizzeria or whether it's a podcast or building a community or whatever it is, like it's really one of the most powerful tools there is to have, like, to create agency in your life and to affect change, um, however you envision that change to be. So
Agreed. Um, Building a business, building this podcast has not been without sacrifice. And I want to ask you, what are some of the sacrifices that you made in addition to making, it sounds like, weekly trips to St. Louis? You know, you said a bloodbath earlier. Maybe elaborate more on some of the sacrifices that you've had to endure to make this business work.
well, I mean, I've been, like I said, I was doing this. I've been doing this for 11
Wow.
years. The St. Louis portion was the first 2 years, right? So after 2 years, that business got sold, and or that facility got sold, and the new owners were pretty much like, "Get out of here!" Like I got a call one day, uh, basically saying like, "You need to have all your stuff out of here in 2 weeks." Um, and I was like, I mean, in cured meat speak, that's like that's like half a second. And I was like, "What do you mean? Like I have a couple thousand pounds of product hanging in your drying room right now. I have customers like." Um, So there's been a lot of changes, a lot um, of trying to figure it out over the years. I mean, some of the sacrifices I've had to make over the years. I mean, I think like when you start a business, like you have to be kind of you have to kind of get comfortable with a certain degree of instability in your life. Um, and for me, and you kind of like have to repeat this question in your head of like, all right, if that happens, how bad is it really? you know, like, what, like if this scenario comes to play out, like, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? You know, like, and for me, I think like financially, it's been definitely a roller coaster. Certain advantages for sure, but also look a lot of sacrifices in making this work. Um, you know, but I think like life is full of sacrifices, right? Like whatever you make, whatever you end up doing. So I've never really thought about it in terms of like what am I sacrificing. I've always thought about it in terms of like, I like I'm really intent on this working. I'm really intent on moving this thing forward. Um, and it's like if you have a job where you need to be at work at 9 o'clock in the morning, um, and you like to wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, well then you need to sacrifice a couple hours of sleep to get out of bed, and like anything you do in life like comes with some sacrifice. And I think for me, like I've tried to not think about it so much as sacrifice and more of just like tasks of like, okay, if I want A, then I need to do B, and in my case, it's been like get comfortable with a certain degree of instability, get comfortable with a certain amount of kind of like oh shit moments, um, but with the understanding that like overall, the sum of all the parts is still like feels more valuable to me than if I had to just like abandon ship and like do something completely different or like get a 9 to 5.
What is one mistake in pizza business or life? Using commodity olive oil. And if you don't know what that is, I invite you to try the olive oil that's in your cupboard right now. When Cordo first invited me to do this, I was shocked. My olive oil tasted rancid, and to make matters worse, I was incorporating it in my pizza. Today, I only use Cordo olive oil for my pizza, and the difference is night and day. Cordo picks their olives at their peak and bottles them up only when you order. That way, it tastes fresh when it gets to you. The difference is night and day. Pizza operators can get a free olive oil tasting through Cordo. Just use the link in the show notes. And if you're not a pizzeria, don't worry. You can get a tasting too at a very nominal cost. Make sure to check out Cordo olive oil and level up your pizza game today. Our next sponsor is Pleasant Hill Grain. Are you thinking about ramping up your production? Let's face it, when we're mixing by hand, you're limited by your hand's physical strength. I have mixed 10-pound batches, 20-pound, 30-pound batches, and it hurts. Your hands get tired, and it feels like it just never ends. That all changed when I got my FAMAG mixer through Pleasant Hill Grain. They are North America's exclusive distributor for FAMAG, and so if you're looking to get one, they're the place to go. Check out the link in the show notes for my affiliate link. Again, no extra cost for you for buying it there, but it does greatly help the show. I appreciate you for listening to my show sponsors. Now back to the podcast. When did you finally make this your full-time thing? And what allowed you to say, okay, I'm ready. There's less instability than there was today, and I could probably live off of this.
Yeah. I mean, it was soon after because it was like I would say like July, August 2011, somewhere around there, where I was doing it. I mean, I didn't have a lot of responsibility in my life at the time, so that was working to my advantage. I was sharing an apartment with two friends of mine. I didn't have like a lavish lifestyle or anything like that, so I didn't really mind like having a very low overhead. It was pretty early on, and I was very lucky in that regard too, because I know that that's not the case for a lot of people, but I was able to dive in head first.
Perfect. So when you
Yeah.
got kicked out of your place, what happened next?
We were out of production. We ended up being out of production for about 6 months.
What did you do with all that meat?
It was, well, no, we sold it. Like they let us finish that production. They let us finish whatever was in there, luckily. But I was like immediately having to, but they didn't let us put anything new into production. And that was for us, like we always had to have some like new things in the back, in the mix. So like I started that process, the process that I started 2 years earlier, you know, started it again, but I guess like the advantage that I had this time was like I had now been in the industry for 2 years. I had met people, um, you know, whereas before I was trying to create life. Now this life form had been created. We had some customers. We had this thing that was moving. So the conversations were a little easier at that point. It wasn't just like this sort of pie in the sky idea of like getting this like 26-year-old kid to make salami in your building. It was like, all right, like we've been selling this much every month, and we could, we could talk about minimums, or we could talk about actually like having a program like that was ready to go on day one. So that made the conversation a little easier. But it was not. Um, and I thought a lot about building our own facility at that point. But again, it was like a ton of money, ton of time, a ton of knowledge that I felt like I still didn't completely have. Definitely did not have the money for it. Um, so I ended up finding another small place, a little closer to home this time. Um, and that kind of got us through, like, yeah, being out of production for 6 months was really hard. Um, I ended up taking a loan during that time because I had a couple of employees helping me out. I ended up taking a loan just to like float their salaries. That was tough. It was tough. About a few months later, I found a small place that kind of like helped us just get some product out, but I was not happy with the product, to be honest with you. And I realized like we had like now created this product that I was not feeling so good with. The facility that I found was not, it wasn't the best fit. So I ended up going someplace else. Like that lasted for, I don't know, a few small handful of months. And then I found this other place in New Jersey that was closer to home, that had some capacity, that was looking to fill their capacity. Um, and so we started producing there. It was a similar setup, but this time I could just like go there from my apartment. I didn't have to like spend a week, you know, uh, staying with my friend's mom, which which was awesome. But I was able to do this, and um, so we started getting some production going there. But then that place got shut down by the USDA. They were doing some things that they were, I guess, not supposed to be doing. And when they had the issue with the USDA, um, basically they were like, we need to sell this place like ASAP because we need to get out of here. They had, you know, all kinds of issues that they needed to deal with for themselves. And one of the reasons they needed to sell the plant. So I ended up getting another loan, buying that facility. It was a small facility, and yeah, we started producing product in there, and it was wonderful for many reasons. I learned a lot, you know, being in that facility, made a lot of great connections. But ultimately it didn't work out. We started diversifying our product line because like we had a very hard time with USDA allowing us to do air dried, like what we do, like non-heat treated, air dried, slow cured salami. The USDA was giving us a lot of flack. Um, and it was like we were getting like validation studies that they weren't accepting, and like all the science. And I don't want to get into like the whole USDA rabbit hole because the USDA is problematic. I mean, conceptually it's a good organization, but function, sort of in real life, um, it, like we had our first inspector was like this guy who walked in there and he was just like, oh, he looked at our drying room and like all this product drying, and he was like, you can eat this stuff. And I was like, yeah, man, it's salami. It's salami. It's like, he's like, but it's not cooked, and I was
What?
like, but I was like, but yeah, but with this process, he's like, wait a second. He's like, I'm from down south, and I've never seen this stuff before. And I was like, this conversation would be fine if you didn't have the power to shut us down. you know, like you could like walk in here and for any reason decide to shut us down. you know, so and they're in there every day. The USDA, they're in there every single day, and you're required by law to have an office for them
Wow.
in the plant. So it was just like a whole thing. So we had to get into other products. Anyway, I was dealing with all that at this time, and it was just like a money pit. It was like, great, we have our own facility, and it was fun for many different reasons and interesting, but it was still like a money pit. This loan that I had taken out, it's like every week it would just go boom, 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 boom. The balance would just like shrivel. And at that time, I met a person who was from Spain, who had experience working in like the Spanish cured meats world in Spain, and he was involved in a group of people who wanted to open up a place like a curing facility in upstate New York. And these people had, the resources. This group had the resources behind them to open up like what in my case would be like a dream facility, but like I guess for them it was just kind of like a test kitchen, right? But it was but like from a from a from a quality perspective, from like an equipment perspective, from a regulatory perspective, like all that stuff, they were like super super dialed in. They were like excellent at all the things that I was really struggling with. And he approached me and he was like, Charles, let me help you out. Like, you're really losing your head doing this facility. Like, um, you know, you don't need to be doing this. Like, we can help you with the production side, and you can focus on like growing the business, right? You can focus on everything else. I was like, oh no, man, like I'm doing this, like we're good. Typical like stubborn, 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 like it was like, you know, I asked my father, my mother, my wife, everybody would tell you, like, Charles, he's very stubborn. He's got a hard ass head on him. And I did this for about a year and a half. Where that was all right. Call me when you're ready. Call me when you're ready. Call me when you're ready. And I was like, no, 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 we're good, man. We're good. Like, I'm never gonna call you. So one day, we had this like audit by the USDA. Came in 4 inspectors. They came in and just like tore shit up, man. Like it wasn't like any big problem, It was just like, this is rusty and this needs to be changed. And why do you have this? Oh, this thing, this doesn't have a label on it. And then they had like a clipboard and it was just like ding, 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 ding. And like, mind you, I was like running the facility, running our sales program, doing like I was wearing many different hats. I had a couple of guys working with me that were fantastic, doing production and like doing some of the other things. But like as far as like running the facility and like making sure that we were selling, it was just me. And that's like any sort of well organized charcuterie operation. There's a plant manager, usually there's a HACCP manager, usually there's a director of sales. These are all like full-time jobs, that I feel like people have. And I was like doing them all, and I was not doing any of them well. Like everything just seemed to be crumbling. At the same time, my wife, we found out that we were having a baby. My wife was like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and it was actually like the day after Trump got elected. It was like the election happened. Everybody was, there was a lot of emotions going on, and I got to work that morning. My wife told me I was pregnant. Soon after, like we had this audit where they tore everything up. In the back of my mind, I had this guy from Spain's voice, and I was like, all right, you know what? I think let's do it. So like I think that now's the time. Like I don't think I can continue doing this anymore. Like we need to basically eliminate everything that's not working, because otherwise like this business is not gonna is gonna we're gonna go under. It was like, do I want to like keep this facility or do I want to keep the business? So I just after that USDA meeting, I said, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And I went right into my landlord's office and I gave him notice. And I was like, I'm out of here, man. I called the guy from Spain. I'm like, bro, it's me. Um, and that happened in 2016. And from there, we've turned the production around completely. And so now I have this production partner in New York. Uh, and it's completely given me the opportunity to like
Wow.
turn around the business division of labor, and I think it's easy. Like I know like a lot of small pizza operators out there think like this. I definitely think like this. It's this notion that like you have to do everything yourself, and um and yeah, sometimes you do have to do everything yourself, but eventually like you get to a point where you're like, what kind of like separated the human species from our predecessors was like that we could work in teams, and we can have division of labor. So yeah, I was very lucky to find a production partner. And when I say production partner, I really mean like a partner. These are people who you're partners with that, that you have to work super closely with, that we're communicating every day, um, and controlling every element of the process, working together to make sure every element of the process is as good as it can possibly be. So, you know, I think don't be afraid to work in teams. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Um, that was a turning point for me.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And congratulations for getting out of that hole. It could be scary. What you were describing seemed very scary, but I'm glad that it sounds like it's working out now. We also talk about the difference between the Ezzos and the Hormels of the world in comparison to Charles's product. So you want to stick around for that. Hey, Pizza Pal. As we get closer to wrapping up this show, I just want to ask for one quick favor. If you are enjoying this episode, if you've enjoyed any of the episodes, if you enjoy the episodes that are yet to come, I ask that you do one thing to help support the show, and that is sharing the episode on Instagram. Now, there are probably a million ways to do this, but the easiest way to do it is through Spotify. Whether you listen there or not, they make it so easy to just click the share button. They have an Instagram button, and once you click that, it'll share directly to your story. That's it. When people see it on your story, they can click that and they can listen to it right then and there. Now, before you go and do that, please remember to tag me when you do that at What's Good Dough on Instagram. That way, when I see that you've shared it, it does two things. One, it fills my heart. And then two, I'll reshare it on my Instagram stories too. I greatly appreciate the love and support. I love you. And let's get back to the show. You just mentioned small pizzerias. And I wanted to ask you, are you in the pizza market, and who is your product for?
Definitely. So we're slowly getting more into the pizza market, and it's something that I want to do more of, because like pizza is obviously a food that's very close to my heart. Kid growing up in New York, I was eating pizza practically every day, and I always see it as like pizza to me. Like there are two great equalizers in New York City. It's the subway and the pizzeria. And it's like no matter what, everybody rides the subway, no matter you're rich or poor or whatever, and no matter what, people eat a slice of pizza, and it's the type of food that really brings people together. And so like just on a personal note, it's important to me. Um, Over the years, like we have not worked with too many pizzerias. We worked with a few. We've mainly been like a retail product. So we work in specialty food stores, wine shops, sheet shops, beer stores. But recently, we're starting to get into, more pizzerias little by little. We were doing a program with a small pizzeria in Philly called Eva. We're doing a program with a guy in New York. He does a lot of pop-ups. He's a Happy Bully Pizza. There's a guy up in the Hudson Valley, he's another pop-up person. His name is Pizza Nightmare, but make an amazing product. So little by little, we're also close to starting a program with Chef Chris Bianco, in his new pizzeria in LA. I'm sort of hesitant to say that it's 100% happening, but like we're definitely going to have some product in his in his orbit. Whether it's going to be on the pizza or on the antipasta platter, I'm not really sure yet. Um, so that's another pizzaiolo, obviously iconic pizzaiolo. We were doing some work with, um, and yeah, and then there's a handful of other pizzerias that we've worked with over the years. I think it's hard that one of the challenges that I face is that you can like you can find product that's not you can find less expensive product than ours is, right? And I'm not to say that ours is like so expensive that it's unaffordable. No, but like there's a lot of cheap salami available. So I think that's been like one of the challenges. Pizzaiolo has so much to worry about, so many ingredients to think about that just finding somebody who wants to take the time to even have a conversation about charcuterie. To me, like when I find that like when I can find a pizzaiolo who wants to have that conversation, then it's much easier. But a lot of times people say, what, we're good. Like we have too much going on. We have too much to worry about, and that's totally understandable. Um, so yeah.
You know, you had mentioned earlier about like the start of this whole process and this journey, and you were at, I think, a bodega, and you were looking at the, couple of salamis that were available, and you asked yourself, how come not many of these are ingredient focused? And you said you later found out why. Um, can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe try to bridge that with the pizza makers who need to know more about your product?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that the barrier to entry in a making a product in the USDA environment is a lot higher, just because of some of the things that I alluded to before. You're dealing with most food in this country is regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So anything that's not meat, poultry, or eggs is regulated by the FDA or the local health department, which is, I mean, the case with most pizzerias. Um, but in our case, like basically proving to the U.S. government that we're gonna make this not cooked product safe and ready to eat through a process of like leaving it in the zone where it's most prone to spoilage for long periods of time. That's to prove that to the U.S. government is much harder than I thought. That's essentially what it is. And when you're dealing with foods that have more obvious food safety steps, right? Like with a pizza, if it has, whatever, if the cheese is bad or whatever, like you put it in the oven, and usually like all the temperature, like that high temperature, will kill off a lot of the unwanted pathogens that are like maybe present on that pizza, right? But with salami, it's so it's a lot more delicate, because like I said, like you're never going above 78, 77 degrees, and a lot can go wrong, right? And I think that now you're starting to see more producers come out, and I think in the last 2-3 years we've started to see like a proliferation of smaller producers, but comparatively speaking, compared to other categories in the food world, it's a lot slower, and I think it's because of like all the challenges from a regulatory side. Um, you know,
Hmm. I
yeah,
can't. I don't want to leave this conversation without talking about like the Hormels and the maybe even the Ezzos of the world. But like,
yeah.
what's the main difference between the three of you guys?
All right. I think that it's really important to talk about quality of the raw materials and the raw materials themselves, right? So I'll just give you an example. Like ours, you know, we have two items that we push for pizzerias, right? One is a mild chorizo. It's essentially it's meat, salt, tiny, tiny bit of sugar for the fermentation, and a really beautiful pimentón de la Vera, pimentón from the La Vera region of Spain, and a little bit of garlic. Those five ingredients. We have a salami picante, which is the same idea, just some hot chilies instead of the pimentón. Those are the ingredients, and it's all from heritage breed pork, all vegetarian fed, no antibiotics, no synthetic growth hormones, certified by the Global Animal Partnership. So just like, which is essentially like tantamount to a certified humane uh, um, rating. So you have really good raw materials. Oh, and the salt, all hand harvested, solar evaporated sea salt. So really good meat, really good salt, transparent and short ingredient list. All of the ingredients, you know what they are, right? So I'll start with that. You take like a Rosa Grande pepperoni, and it's like, I want to preface this like no disrespect. Like it's not like, I don't like doing like a tit for tat or whatever. Like I always say, like our products are meant to be complementary to what's out there already, not to take the place of. But if you're comparing it head to head, I think it's a completely different product. Number one, the pepperoni is cooked. Number two, it's really using all conventional pork that you really have no insight into how the pigs are being raised, being administered, and a whole series of antibiotics, this whole series of feed, which is not really, which is problematic on a number of levels. They're raised in confinement settings, which essentially means they're raised in crates for their entire life. They never see the light of day. So that's number one. And then number two is the ingredients. Like I just before we spoke, I pulled up the ingredient statement for Rosa Grande pepperoni. It's like BHA, BHT with citric acid, pork, beef, dextrose, spices, sodium ascorbate, oleoresin of paprika, which is not real paprika. Um, all these things, which is like, the half the ingredients list is things that you don't understand. Things that like the average person would not know what they are, or know why you would have them in a food that you're eating. So I would say that. So and then of course like those products are cooked, and our products are air dried.
Can you harp on a little bit more about the about why a cooked? I don't want to say like why cooked is inferior to your product, or maybe you can just like
no,
what is the difference?
It's not a question of inferior or superior. It's just a question of different, right? You're gonna get you're getting to me you're getting a much when you don't cook a product, you don't heat treat it, you're getting something that's much more nuanced, much cleaner, much more layered, that than if you had something that was just like heat treated, fast fermented. It's kind of like saying, I don't want to make the exact comparison, but it's kind of like saying, Domino's pizza versus like, I listened to an episode the other day with with what was it like? Pardon the word she called by the pizza slut, like
Kellyanne.
With Kellyanne. I mean, she seems amazing. Like I'm listening to what she's doing, and she's like in her car, running the AC, making sure the fermentation doesn't get messed up, like all these things. Like that's to me, like that's the difference. It's like, yeah, you could, order Domino's or you can get one of her pizzas. Like they're both pizza in theory, right? But they're completely like one is a lot more nuanced, one has a lot more character, one has a lot more love put into it. One I think is highly, highly preferable to put in your body than the other. And that's to me like one of the fundamental differences between like some of the conventional pepperonis, the conventional salamis out there, and our stuff. And I will say this, like we can talk more about ingredients and all this kind of thing, but one of the things that I love about like talking to pizzerias who are like very ingredient focused, like people like Kaylee, like and so many of the guests that are on your show, you have like I was listening to your episode with Chris Townsend, the gentleman in Great Britain, Doe-Eyed, people who are like in that frame of mine that are doing like really ingredient driven, slow fermentation, quality focused pizza. Like, why are you going to put all this time, all this energy, all this love into all these elements of your pizza, and then like with the pepperoni or with the salami, like why are you willing to turn the other cheek to that?
Mm.
And so when I'm able to really like get into conversation with pizzaiolos who are care a lot about their ingredients. Yeah, you got people out, you need to, everybody needs to make money, everybody needs to make a profit, everybody needs to control their costs. Like, I get that. And I'm not trying to, I'm in the same boat, we're all in that boat. But there are ways of doing that without, I think, sacrificing your ethos to be super quality focused and super ingredients driven. Um, and when I'm able to kind of like get deep with some of the pizzaiolos out there, pizza makers out there, um, it's beautiful, right? Because we kind of get to this understanding that like we're all approaching this in the same way. We're very ingredients driven, we're very quality driven, um, and if I'm going to go through all this work of making this like extremely complicated food, which is pizza, like why would I, you know, with whatever, maybe it's the last ingredient you put on your pie, and you put some pepperoni on there or whatever, like why would you um why would you be willing to compromise on that? And maybe um and there's a lot of people out there who say, I'm not willing to compromise on that, and that's why they work with a charcuterie maker who's a little, who I think shares similar ethos to that we do. And there's a lot of really great ones out there these days. Like I said, over the last 2-3 years, there's some fantastic producers who have come on.
Yeah, I can think of a handful for you off the top of my head that I think would love this product and would, specifically choose to go with yours over the other. I don't know. Maybe if you all are listening, I'm thinking Razza. I'm thinking Gracie's a pizza in Portland. I'm thinking maybe even Carlson Block. I would say like these pizzeria. I'm guessing that your customer is not the person who wants to sell 1,000 pies a night, right? I'm thinking that yours does, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking yours has a focus on quality over quantity.
I would say so. Look, obviously we all want to sell and maximize our earnings, but yeah, I would say overall there's a focus on quality over quantity. Sometimes I like to get deep on the mathematics of these things and ask yourself, like, well, what are you really saving when you're using like a less expensive version, and we don't have to get super deep into it now, but like if I think about like a small salami that we make that's like 5 ounces, you can get like 100 slices out of it, and it's like the average slice of pepperoni pizza has like 13, 14 slices on it. And if you start breaking down like what the cost per unit is compared to like what you could actually sell for having, typically like adding pepperoni to a pizza is like $3, somewhere around there. But like, if you add like a higher quality salami, maybe you can charge $4 or $5 for that topping, right? And suddenly like the increase in the charge offsets the increase in the cost per the item.
So,
and I do think that there's a lot of value in thinking about it that way.
I do see that way. And I just recently went to Oak and Rye Pizzeria, who I think uses Molinari salami. They produce in San Francisco. And when I went there, I went to get a cheese pizza and pepperoni. And I knew that's what I wanted that day because I wanted to post on Instagram. And I knew that I was craving a pepperoni pizza, but I also wanted to post a pepperoni one specifically on Instagram. And when I went to go order it, the cheese pizza is about $15. And then the add pepperoni is about $5. And the thing is though, like they do only put so much on there. And so I was really hoping for a little bit more, but from a cost perspective, it makes sense. Now, I'm thinking to myself, some of the problems with that, just in general, is that, I just posted the pizza today. And so I'm going to assess whether or not it's grammable, if the people are looking at it and if it's catching eyes. But like my problem is that like pizzas with pepperoni that look better are typically ones that are like stacked, like the Eddie's pizzas of the world,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
they're doing double, triple peps, and it's shareable, and I think that's part of the reason. That's part of the problem, and it's not the healthiest, sure, but
yeah.
I'm just kind of spitting words there.
No, but sometimes that's what you want, though. Like I totally get that. Like sometimes that's what you're in the mood for. Look, I want to like I totally understand that there's like there's a bridge that needs to, I think, be built between a lot of people in the pizza community, not everybody, and like people in our community, like the I guess the small charcuterie producer community. And so I want to like throw something out there, pizzaiolos that are listening. I'll send you some product, right? But instead of slicing the product, thin, whatever, just like traditional rounds, putting it on a pie, like fire it in the oven, old school. I want the pizzaiolo to slice the product lengthwise, right? If they have access to a slicer, ideally, right? So take the whole salami, slice it lengthwise on a slicer so you get long, thin, beautiful strips of salami, right? And instead of firing that product in the oven, put it put it on top of the pizza when it comes out of the oven, right? So that the residual heat from the pie kind of opens up the salami, and that will, I think, answer your like the abundance question. Because like when I heard you describe like what you're thinking at Oak and Rye versus Eddie's, like it's a question of abundance, right? Like you pay a certain amount of money, you want to get some abundance. And I think when you present salami this way on a pizza, kind of like in Italy, you get like a prosciutto di Parma pizza, and it's just like slices of
Sure.
prosciutto on the pizza when it comes out of the oven. And it's a
I see
different
it.
way of thinking about charcuterie on a pizza. So I'm going to throw the challenge out there. I'm going to say like we can come up with the terms of this contest or whatever it is. I want to say that 5 or 10 pizzaiolos hit me up on Instagram or hit up Hydra, but however you want to do it. I'll send you some product to do some test pies with, and show me your best way of like presenting in abundance salami slice lengthwise. And I don't want to guarantee it, but I feel very confident that it will help look at charcuterie in a different way on pizza, and it might open the door to a new pie on your menu.
All
I
right,
don't
let's do that. I'm excited to see everyone's
know.
creations. Maybe we can talk more about the
you
rules
know,
via an email, and then we can put it up as a post. How does that sound, Charles?
I love it. I love it. I love it. And think about it in terms. I think about things in terms of flavor and texture. So I would say think about those two things. Maybe something crunchy on the pie. Obviously, the salami is not going to get, it's not going to cup, it's not going to char, or whatever, the way you might think of pepperoni traditionally doing. So think of texture, think of acidity, think of all the salami textures, and we'll take it from there.
Cool. I'm excited to see that, and you got me really hungry. So I think we do need to wrap this up.
Yeah,
Um,
man. All right.
I want to
All
ask
right.
you my two final questions. What is one mistake in
All right.
pizza, business, or life that one can avoid?
I can spend a lot of time on this question, but I'll just leave it with this. It's not that serious. I think for me, I really go down the rabbit holes. Like the worst days of my journey in the food world is when I let go of the fun and I just double down on the seriousness and I let that just eat away at me. And it hinders and inhibits my ability to think clearly, to problem solve, to make rational decisions. Um, so I would say like even when things get very ugly and challenging, you know, try to not take it so I don't want to say don't take it so seriously, but like try to relax about it and uh, have just have fun with the process because even in the darkest moments, there's like little opportunities for fun and enjoyment, and those are like oftentimes the biggest growth moments. So that's 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 what I'll say. That's one of the bigger mistakes that I've made many times. I'm trying to get better at as the journey
Thank you
continues.
for your honesty. Charles,
Yeah.
I want to give you the space. What do you want to leave the audience with today?
I just want to say thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate your time, your attention. I know that your time is limited. The day is only 24 hours in the day. And if you made it this far in the episode, then that means you've given us over an hour of your time, most likely. I want to say thank you. That really means a lot. And, don't hesitate to reach out to me on Instagram or via email, charles@charlitoscocina.com. And would love to keep our conversation going. And thank you to you, Hydra, for the opportunity to be on your podcast. As I said earlier, man, I really love what you're doing. Big fan of your show, and it's an honor and super humbling, man, to be on this side of the mic. So thank you.